Hey everybody, Adam Savage, and I am at the National Parks Museum Conservation Labs with Daisy. Good morning, how are you? I love that we're in the wood shop, and we haven't discussed what I'm about to see. Tell me what's going on here.
Yeah, so this is a small mahogany case clock with a reverse painted glass window down there.
Yeah.
So this is owned by the Harpers Ferry National Historical Park, which is just down the road. This comes from a watchmaker's shop down there that's kind of being reinstalled at the moment. So I've been lucky to work on a couple objects from it.
What was the task with this clock particularly?
Yeah, I think right off the bat, it was missing one of these two finials up here, these pineapples. So I was tasked with recreating one. Can you guess which is the recreation?
Oh my goodness. How much fun must that have been?
Wow. I'm flattered. You're looking so hard.
I am looking so hard. I think that's the replica.
You're correct.
Is it a casting?
It is a casting. So lucky for me, not very lucky for the clock. This finial, this extant finial was loose when I got it. So
amazing.
I was able to pop that thing off and make a silicone mold.
Oh, and I'm always casting into my silicone molds with resin, but you're not going to use resin for a project like this.
Well, I could have. Because this is a replica part, I pretty much have a larger library of materials that I can choose from, as long as it's something inert that will age well, that will take the color I need it to. So I did a couple tests. So these, let's see if I remember. This one is a 2-part epoxy putty. So that's this here, you kind of mix it up as a putty.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, and I pressed it into both halves of the mold.
It's so lightweight.
Yeah, it is. It is.
That's crazy. I didn't even know about that. I gotta write that stuff down.
That stuff's great. It takes color well. It's fun to work with. You should wear gloves when you use it because it's kind of a tactile nightmare. It gets you all sticky.
Fair. Tell me true, was there a part of you, did you know immediately that casting was going to be the solution? Or was there a moment when you thought, I'm just going to have to do this with a file and a carving knife?
Yeah, there was.
Were you excited?
I was excited for about 30 seconds, and then I started carving, and I was like, there's no way. There's no way. I mean, they're so perfect. They've got this really like Fibonacci kind of spiral like coming down there. It's just, Well, it's also like there's a difference between something that one person carved once. This is part of a production process, and it's got a refinement of repeatability that is so hard to do as a one-off, I would imagine. Yeah, I was definitely intimidated by that. So thrilled to know that one was loose, and I could kind of,
All right, so that's the wood epoxy.
Yeah, that's the wood epoxy, and then these two are both the lightweight hydrocal plaster that I was able to just pour in there.
Lightweight hydrocal, I didn't even know
Even
that.
lighter weight than the wood
That
epoxy.
is, wow. Was that the only task on this?
So the finish also needed to be addressed. So it was kind of crackled. The natural, what we expect might have been some kind of natural shellac or something, was
on
really
the whole thing?
Yeah. So it was kind of bubbly and alligatored, which I addressed that with some micro polishing cloths to kind of wear down the finish a little bit, and then actually resolubilize it with alcohol in some areas.
So so your first pass is to take out a lot of the highest spots. And you get it to close to an even surface, but then you let the solvent do the rest?
Yes.
That's fascinating, because it really doesn't look like it has any coating at all on it. It looks totally authentic.
Yeah.
I mean, original.
Yeah, and that's the good thing about kind of reworking an original coating like that, because you're not removing everything, you're just redistributing what was already there, kind of making it look a little more cared for in that way.
Now I'd imagine every time you do that, that potentially a different solvent is necessary. You have to figure out what the finish was first.
Yes,
is that right?
Yeah. I mean, thankfully there are pretty standard, techniques in
shellac,
these.
et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. So that's predictable. But yeah, if it doesn't respond to alcohol, it's kind of, what could this be? Kind of into like some, restoration materials. God forbid there's some kind of like polyurethane or epoxy on there. Yeah. So yeah, lucky with this one, alcohol did the trick.
Is that a little ivory case around there?
It is. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, really lovely. Yeah, so I also did a lot of work on the clock face for this. So here's some in progress pictures. This one, you can see there's just some abrasions here through the paint. Yeah. Also, almost all of the little gilt dots around the center were missing. And a lot of the little raised gilt scroll work on the outsides. So I recreated those with this really, we love this product in conservation. It's kind of an acrylic spackle that's really nice to work with. It's soluble in water, so it's easy to kind of thin out and paint and then like shape. So I was able to put that in the missing areas.
Look at that, you're just building up exactly where it's missing.
Under the microscope, shaping with little, little dental tools like that, kind of putting it exactly where it needs to go.
Is that you with magnifying glasses on, or are you using a movable microscope?
Yeah, actual stereo microscope.
Okay. The stereo microscope gives you a wide range field of vision, doesn't it? A depth of field?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds... How long was that process of slowly rebuilding all the gilded dots and the scroll?
That was probably a solid work week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you go home and just dream of clock faces all the time?
Yeah, I can't remember if they were dreams or nightmares, but yeah.
All right, so from this clock case, is this another from the same shop?
Yeah, another bit of recreation. So this piece is really exciting, a pocket watch display case from the same watchmaker shop. So it came to us like this. So you can see the color of the velvet really degraded. A lot of the pile of the velvet was kind of shedding just through exposure to light, other environmental factors. But I was kind of stumped about it, to be honest. I didn't really know how I was going to approach it. Yeah. So I figured I would start with something I knew. I was going to remove all of the little hooks to clean them individually. The first hook that I removed exposed this, which is a perfectly preserved dot of the original color of velvet.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, so those little caps under the hooks, that was enough to insulate that original material from the air, from the light, and that just gave us our clue of what this thing used to look like.
And then you're able to bring it back to what? So it's fascinating. I'd love that if you guys know that this was lined in a velvet, but you don't know the color, you're not proceeding towards just putting any old velvet in there.
Yeah, that would kind of go against some of our ethics.
There's in my replication of things, if it turns out I got even the tiniest dimension wrong, I just need to start from scratch and build the whole thing again. I love finding out that ethos is institutionalized.
Yeah,
here.
You got the blood of a conservator. Yeah.
Can I look inside?
Yeah, so we've got this beautiful hand-blown glass plate, and then inside, you might notice a couple of the little hooks have this little heat shrink tubing on them. This will get reinstalled with silver pocket watches, so I wanted to have a system that would protect the silver from being abraded by the hooks. So those are just slipped on where those pocket watches will go back.
Okay, I have a technical question, which is you pull all these out and you lay some felt over it. How do you know where the holes are?
Yeah, so I made a template out of Mylar that I marked all the holes, and then I pierced holes with a little Japanese screw punch. If you've never used one of those, it's a delight of a tool.
All right.
But basically just makes the most precise little holes, and then I was able to transfer that to the velvet and then make little holes through the velvet using that template.
Did you guys dye your own velvet based on that color?
Yeah, so we custom dyed this, which was...
we did another video about your custom dyeing process. It's very involved.
It's very involved, yeah. The trial and error, it's a long process to have to repeat a lot. So I was very lucky to get a pretty accurate color.
Again, with those long processes, everyone I've been talking to here is so thrilled about this work and about the objects and about the mission. And I'm really getting the endorphin rush you guys get when the thing is all together after all the hard labor of research and construction. Daisy, this has been so thrilling, and I love that replication. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
Thank you guys so much for watching. One of my favorite things we make in our tested store are demerit badges. These are like scout badges, but for screwing stuff up, because screwing up is not just a part of the making process, it is intrinsic to it, and we like to celebrate that. We've got 27 so far in the Supervisors bundle that you can go buy right now by clicking on the link in the description, but we also have a booster pack of some brand new patches. This is the demerit badge for burning off your eyebrow. I am proudly sewing that to all of my clothes. This is the demerit badge for having a messy workbench, which I do not get today. My workbench is super clean. And we have new octagonal patches that are, merit badges. This is the merit badge for sweeping up your shop. Congratulations, I'm so proud of you. And this, oh my God, this is great. This is the merit badge for creating a clean space on your bench. Hey, we got to take our successes where they come and meet them there. Go to the tested-store.com or adamsavage.com to buy any of these, or click on a link in the description.